The Allies thought they had Rommel cornered. They had more tanks, more planes, more men, and endless supplies. On paper, his Africa Corps should have been crushed. Instead, they feared him. His terrifying secret wasn't a hidden weapon or miracle tank. It was his mind. Rommel fought war as if it were a lightning-fast chess match. He used speed, deception, and fear to make enemies collapse before they even knew what hit them. And that secret almost changed the outcome of World War II. World War II is often remembered as a clash of industries. Whoever could build the most ships, tanks, and planes was expected to win. But Erwin Rommel showed the world something different. In North Africa, he led a smaller, undersupplied force and repeatedly humiliated the British Empire. He earned the nickname the Desert Fox, not because he had the strongest army, but because he made armies much larger than his own panic and retreat. Later, when he returned to Europe, Rommel warned Hitler that the Allies would one day invade France, and that they would use the same tricks he himself had once perfected: speed, deception, and surprise. He was ignored. By then, even the Desert Fox couldn't save Germany. Rommel's terrifying secret was simple but devastating. Battles are often decided in the mind before they are fought on the battlefield. When Rommel arrived in Libya in February 1941, the British were on a high. They had just defeated Mussolini's armies, pushed Italy's forces back hundreds of miles, and secured Egypt. They controlled the Suez Canal, Britain's lifeline to India and Asia. Their supply lines were short. Their tank divisions outnumbered anything Germany could send. Rommel was handed a small force, the Africa Corps, and told to stabilize the situation. Any other commander might have dug trenches and gone defensive. But Rommel saw an opportunity. His challenge was brutal: beat a larger, better supplied army in an unforgiving desert. His answer was terrifyingly simple: never let the enemy fight the battle they were preparing for. Move faster, strike where they don't expect, and make them panic before the shooting starts. Rommel understood that in the desert, movement was everything. With no mountains, forests, or cities to slow him, whoever moved fastest controlled the fight. His tanks became ghosts in the sand. They moved at night across terrain that others thought impossible, and at dawn, they struck like lightning. By the time the British reacted, Rommel was gone, already hitting another target miles away. For Allied commanders, it was maddening. They tried to draw maps and plan defenses, only to discover that Rommel had slipped behind them overnight. Entire fronts collapsed without warning. Soldiers said it felt like the desert itself had turned against them, carrying Rommel's tanks wherever they couldn't be stopped. Rommel never had the numbers. To make up for it, he relied on deception. He turned small forces into illusions of massive armies. Trucks drove in circles, raising giant dust clouds that fooled Allied aircraft into reporting phantom divisions. Wooden poles were strapped to vehicles to look like cannons from the sky. Empty barrels were arranged to look like endless fuel stockpiles. The truth was harsh. His army often ran on fumes. At times, German tanks had to halt because there wasn't enough fuel to move forward. But Rommel advanced anyway, bluffing his way through battles. Allied commanders hesitated, believing they faced overwhelming numbers. Those pauses gave Rommel the edge he needed. Rommel's reputation soon did much of the fighting for him. The British called him the Desert Fox, a name that carried weight. Soldiers whispered it with dread. Some believed he had spies in their headquarters. Others thought he could read their minds. This legend became one of his deadliest tools. Whole units retreated at the rumor of his approach. Allied soldiers started to feel that if Rommel was in their sector, they were already doomed. His terrifying secret was not just tactics. It was making the enemy believe defeat was inevitable. In May 1942, Rommel struck at Gazala. The British had dug in behind a fortified line they thought was unbreakable. Rommel didn't attack directly. He swung wide with his panzers, circling behind their positions. Confusion exploded in the British command. Radio networks filled with desperate, conflicting orders. Some units fought bravely, but within days they found themselves surrounded. Others crumbled and surrendered. Rommel had turned a strong defensive line into a trap, not for him, but for his enemy. It was a masterclass in speed and surprise. Soon after Gazala, Rommel's forces attacked Tobruk, the port fortress the Allies had sworn would never fall. In 1941, Tobruk had resisted a German siege for months. But in 1942, under Rommel's assault, it collapsed in just days. 30,000 Allied soldiers were captured. Huge stockpiles of supplies fell into German hands. For Britain, it was humiliating. Winston Churchill admitted the loss was a bitter and heavy blow. The fall of Tobruk turned Rommel into a legend and showed the world that his terrifying secret worked. A smaller army could break a larger one if it moved faster, struck smarter, and created enough fear. By the summer of 1942, Rommel's panzers were just 60 miles from Alexandria. The Suez Canal was within reach. If it fell, Britain would lose its empire's artery. The Allies were terrified. For soldiers in the desert, the fear was real. Imagine sitting in a tank, parched under the scorching sun. Your fuel is low, your commander is confused, and suddenly dust clouds rise on the horizon. You think it's a small patrol. Minutes later, Rommel's tanks are not in front of you, but behind you. Your retreat is cut off. That was the chaos Rommel created. But his terrifying secret had limits. Speed required fuel. Surprise required supplies. At El Alamein, General Montgomery cut Rommel's supply lines and forced him into a static, grinding battle. His tanks, starved of fuel, could no longer maneuver. His deception lost its edge. After months of brutal fighting, the Desert Fox was forced to retreat. Defeat in Africa didn't end his career. Hitler placed Rommel in charge of the Atlantic Wall, a massive system of defenses stretching from Norway to France. Rommel applied the same principles he had used in Africa. He argued that the Allies would invade, and when they did, they had to be stopped instantly on the beaches. If they gained a foothold, Germany would lose. Rommel begged Hitler to keep armored divisions close to the coast for an immediate counterattack. Other generals wanted the tanks kept inland. Hitler hesitated, leaving the defenses divided. Rommel knew this indecision would prove fatal. On June 6, 1944, Rommel's warnings came true. The Allies invaded Normandy. Before the landings, they executed Operation Fortitude, a brilliant deception plan that convinced German intelligence the invasion would come at Calais. Rommel's predictions about Allied trickery were ignored. The Atlantic Wall, which looked formidable on paper, collapsed under the assault of paratroopers, battleships, and bombers. By the time Rommel returned, he had been away visiting his wife, the Allies had secured a beachhead. He knew immediately that Germany was finished. The terrifying secret he had once used so effectively, speed, deception, and fear, was now being used against him. By late 1944, Rommel was a broken man. He had been injured in an air attack. He was exhausted, disillusioned, and increasingly critical of Hitler's reckless orders. He urged Germany to make peace, but his honesty was dangerous. When he was linked, fairly or not, to the July 20th plot to assassinate Hitler, his fate was sealed. The regime could not risk putting him on trial, where his popularity might spark revolt. Instead, he was given a choice: take his own life quietly or see his family destroyed. On October 14, 1944, Rommel drank poison. Even in death, Rommel remained respected. His men admired him as a commander who shared their hardships. His enemies, including Churchill, praised him as a great general. He was feared, admired, and ultimately betrayed by the regime he once served. Rommel's terrifying secret was never about weapons or numbers. It was about psychology. He used speed to keep enemies off balance, deception to make them see dangers that didn't exist, and fear to convince them they were already beaten. In North Africa, he came within sight of the Suez Canal, nearly breaking the British Empire's grip on its lifeline. In Europe, he foresaw how the Allies would invade and tried to prepare, but his warnings were ignored. His story was brilliant and tragic. A general who terrified his enemies, inspired his men, but clashed fatally with his own leader. Rommel proved that wars aren't always won by the biggest armies. Sometimes they're won by the sharpest mind. And that truth, that one man's genius could shake entire nations, terrified the Allies more than any weapon ever could. Subscribe for more untold stories of history's greatest battles.